Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our technical Tuesday evening. It's a dark and stormy night where I am. I'm not too sure what it's like where you are, but we're very thankful for the rain because it's washing all the dust away that we've had just recently. So tonight I start a new series, and when I was doing my research, I discovered that obviously the main topic for October, apologies, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But we covered cancer a few weeks ago, so about 2 series back. So if you wanted to have a look at that, you're welcome to go back to the recordings and check it out. But October is also ADHD Awareness Month. And this is something that seems to be becoming a lot more prevalent these days. Again, like with most things, I don't know if people are just more aware of it or if it is actually more of an issue. What scares me a lot of the time is that diagnosis seems to be done too haphazardly. Jenny might understand when I say it's kind of difficult teaching a class of 45 young children who are being young children. You can't get them to focus. It must be an incredibly difficult task to get them to all focus at the same time and to understand what you're trying to teach. So it's probably a lot easier to educate 45 kids who are on drugs and doped and sitting there like little robots and statues. But is that actually good for them? Please note that for ADHD, it shouldn't take a diagnosis by a teacher, no disrespect to the teachers, and a GP to prescribe a series of drugs. It should be diagnosed by a team of teachers who have had the education on what to look for, specialists, not just a GPS, but a specialist who knows what to look for, and a psychologist who knows what to look for. And only then, when all else has been banished, should they then suggest medication. Please note, this is not a medical diagnosis. This is my personal opinion. And it's not a reflection on anybody or anything else out there. So let me share my screen and give you a run through on the bits that I've picked up just recently. Shrink myself down over here. Okay, so ADHD, is it an advantage or is it a disadvantage? I guess it depends on which side of the scale you're looking at it from, but let's have a look, see as we go along. So think of your child or your adult, because adult ADHD is a very real thing as well. Some of the things that are indicators are motivation, where you can't start, you don't have that motivation to get started. Or when you do get started, you can't really stop. Time, do you do it now or later? Are you getting too much sleep or not enough sleep? Conversation, talking, as in verbal diarrhea, or just gone on another planet. Sort of like some teenagers. ADHD is like a TV set that isn't receiving a perfect signal. I don't have a TV that picks up signals, so for those who do have TVs that pick up a signal or even a satellite dish, I understand that if your aerial is slightly out of whack or your satellite dish is slightly out of alignment, your signal is not going to be accurate. And I could probably say the same thing with cell towers. If you are not beaming correctly, and like tonight, it's a dark and stormy night, so there's branches or trees moving around, maybe the tower's moving around, your signal probably isn't going to be perfect. For the child, It's as if the channels keep changing. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried this on somebody, but you sit there and you flip through. And you watch for 30 seconds and you change the channel. And you watch for 30 seconds and you change it. You watch. Keep going like that. It can get very, very irritating. And after a while, you give up trying to focus and concentrate. And this is what a child is like with ADHD. Their world is a constant stream of changing images and messages. Think of a roundabout in the playground. You start spinning it slowly, you can probably keep up. But you hang on, and I'm thinking back to the ones that I had back in my childhood, which were probably not quite as safe as the ones we've got these days, but you spin at a rapid rate. Things are changing continuously. It's difficult to focus on one thing at a time because something new is always coming along. And going through all of this information, I could probably say that I have a tendency towards ADHD myself. Pardon me. Because I can get distracted very easily. It's all rather bewildering and it's hard to keep pace. So some of the core symptoms: you lose a thing, you look all over the place and you spend ages looking for it. You give up hope, so you buy a new one. You find the old one now because you put it in a safe place, and well, now you've put the new one in the safe place as well, and you find the old one, and you lose the thing, and you start again. So one of the cause of this is inattentiveness. Now, you can watch a child, put a child in front of a TV program or a DVD. They still use those these days. And somebody will say, oh, my child's got ADD or ADHD because they're always on the go. They're always messing around. Can't get them to sit still. But they can focus on a TV game or a TV program for 35 minutes at a time. They probably don't have ADHD. They have a short attention span, or they just don't pay attention at all. You can be talking to them and there's nothing there. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Or they're listening to you and then their eyes are going all over the place and let's go. Or oh, there's something interesting over here. Or yeah, okay, I can hear you. No, there's something. And so it goes. They don't seem to listen when spoken to. Another classic sign of a teenager. I've got one of those, but I wouldn't say she's got ADHD. So it doesn't always have to be the case. This is just some symptoms. They fail to finish tasks, or they avoid sustained effort. It's too much like hard work. Really don't feel like doing it. If they can't get the result within 5 or 10 seconds, they're probably going to give up. And you give them a task to do, you take this to there, to there, to there, or even just this to there, and they're going to do it once, and they're going to get sidetracked, and they're not going to finish. They're easily distracted. There's a sudden flash of light over there. Oh, what happened over there? There's a noise in the background. Oh, what happened over there? Or, oh, there's something happening on my phone. What happened over here? Very easily distracted. They can't focus. They can't organize, or they lose things. And yeah, you put something down and you go out into another room, you go, what did I come into this room for? And then you go back and you go, I had something in my hand, but can't remember what it was. Well, these are some of the symptoms of ADHD, but there are also symptoms of other things. Kids seem to be forgetful. You tell them something, and 5 minutes later, they've forgotten that you even opened your mouth, never mind what you said to them. The hyperactivity part, this is the H in the ADHD. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is slightly different to ADD, which is attention deficit disorder. So the hyperactivity part, they're fidgeting. They're constantly touching others. They're chewing gum. They're twiddling their fingers. They're tapping all the time. They're tapping their foot. And these can be small or quite large and exaggerated movements. They're always on the go, unable to sit still. They leave seats in their class. They're unable to remain seated even in a movie at the cinema. They can't sit still for 10 minutes while everybody has dinner together. In assembly, they're probably chatting to their friends, they're pushing each other. All of those are signs. They run and they climb excessively. So in the playground, they're climbing jungle gyms. They're running around. They don't walk from one place to the next. They run, they move. They talk excessively. In other words, the polite way is verbally hyperactive. The impolite way is they've got verbal diarrhea. So a non-ADHD person will tell a story, and they'll start a story, and they'll end the story. And I'll let you go through this little graphic just now if you want to freeze frame about how an ADHD child tells a story. But there's a lot of impulsiveness with them. They're unable to wait their turn at table games, computer games. So if there's two of them playing, probably it wouldn't be so much of a problem. But if there's three or more, they're going to be pushing in line, jumping up and down, irritating the person who is actually playing. They get very impatient. Can you think road rage? Always need to be first. They can't stand to be further down the line. They shout out the answer before the question is complete. Do you know? Yes, 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 that's me. Or they'll just shout out the answer. They finish other sentences, sort of like somebody who's been, or a couple who've been married for 50 odd years, they can generally finish each other's sentences. They interrupt other people's conversations or games. They intrude on others, like games at school in the playground. They'll just push in. They invade others' space. You know, if you're sitting in a crowd, there's that personal space, and they're probably going to be sitting right on top of you, leaning in on you, or tapping your leg, or something to that effect. They don't give you that personal space, that even if it's 5 centimeters, if that's all you've got. So maybe we need to look at this from a different perspective. Kids with ADHD are relatively breakless, meaning that they just don't stop. Energizer Bunny on steroids, because they just don't stop except when they're sleeping. And even then, quite often, they probably are tossing and turning and not sleeping peacefully. They're unable to put the brakes on distraction. So there's always inattention. They're unable to put the brakes on inside thoughts. So they've got no filter. They're impulsive. They're unable to put the brakes on acting upon distractions or thoughts. This is where the hyperactivity comes in. So as I said, there's always something. There's a light, there's a sound, there's a knock, somebody whispered something over there and we want to hear what they said. There's always something. So how common is this condition? In the UK, it's thought that 3 to 5% of school-aged children have got ADHD. And this is according to the NHS in England. There might be more. There's a minor difference in chemical tuning of the brain. Commonly, it's genetic, but environment can also make the symptoms worse. You tend to notice signs before the age of 6. Behavior must be more severe than other young people in the same age group. And again, I sympathize with teachers. You've got 45 7-year-olds, first day of school, back after the December holidays. It must be a living nightmare, maybe for the first week. Again, Jenny, you'd probably be able to attest to this. But once you're getting settled in, and you can start to get to know your children, you'll be able to see there's the quiet ones sitting over there who are wallpaper. There's the noisy one in the other corner. And then there's the one that's probably sitting right in front of you, tapping their pencil, tapping their feet, moving papers around, talking nonstop, tapping their friend. Those are the ones you've got to watch and be careful of. The symptoms above cause significant distress or impairment in social, academic, or occupational functioning, especially when they get older. Think of a group of 6 or 7-year-olds, hyperactive, they're on a sugar high. Now, translate that into a young adult who hasn't learned boundaries. And they've now got to go out into the big wide world and get a job. It's probably going to be quite difficult for them. The symptoms present from about 6 months onwards and across 2 different contexts, for example, school and home. So are they hyperactive at home, but at school they're this innocent little person that sits in the corner and doesn't say a word? Or daycare? Even with friends, are they bouncing off the wall with friends, or are they sitting quietly, but at home they're bouncing off the wall? Those are the little things that one has to look at. So some of the famous people, I don't know how many of these people you can recognize, but there's Jamie Oliver, top left-hand corner. He's a chef. Michael Phelps, the swimmer. I struck a blank on the name of the singer over here. And down the bottom right-hand corner, it's will.i.am, I think it is. So these are some probably quite well-known people. And a few more. Probably the most famous one, bottom left-hand corner, Sir Richard Branson. He's got ADHD. So some of the other symptoms that we need to look at. Inattention. So fail to give close attention to detail. They're easily distracted by external stimuli, noise, sounds, light, easily off task. And they change from one thing to another. They can't just pick up these 4 socks and put them in that pile over there. They'll pick up 3 and then go off and play with the shoes. They have difficulty listening when spoken to because their attention is wandering around all over the place and they can't follow instructions. You need to write your name on the top of this page, and then they can't do that. Unable to complete tasks. Difficulty with organizational skills. They avoid tasks that require mental effort. So if it's not as easy as breathing, and it requires a little bit of more attention to detail, they're probably not going to do it. They forget in daily activities. You told them to close the door when they've gone through. Well, they open the door because they've got to go through and they walk off. Oh, did you tell me to close the door? I forgot about that. They're disorganized. Well, that's one of the symptoms of me too. Very disorganized. So who knows? But again, these are simply symptoms. The overactivity. They're unable to sit still for as long as their peers. They're often up and out of their seat. They look for any excuse to jump. They run and they climb when it's inappropriate. You walk into a shop and they want to climb the shelves. They're constantly fidgeting with their hands and their feet. They're always touching things and moving things. And they, again, Energizer Bunny on steroids. They're restless and shifting excess of movement, so they cannot sit still. Impulsivity, difficulty in taking turns, and they might interrupt. As I said, 3 or 4 kids playing a game, and they're going to be wanting to push in all the time because they can't wait. They're not prepared to wait in line. They're talking a mile a minute. They're unable to engage and play quietly. Have you ever told a child, calm down, quiet, quit yelling? I feel like I do that on a regular basis. They've got premature or thoughtless actions. They do things, and maybe somebody gets hurt. They push a child in the playground. They push them off the jungle gym. They didn't think that somebody got hurt and their arm got broken. And it's because they've got this problem. So some of the other symptoms of ADHD are associated with having lower levels of the brain chemicals dopamine and noradrenaline. Dopamine carries signals between the nerves in the brain and is linked to movement, sleep, mood, attention, and learning, as well as motivation, reward, and cognition. So if your dopamine levels are low, you're going to have a problem with these things. And as we discovered recently, this can lead to things like depression. Certain parts of the brain may be less active or smaller in children with ADHD, my apologies. And the only way to check that out is through fairly intensive medical interventions like CT scans or MRI scans, etc. Even brain activity scans. Noradrenaline is linked to memory, alertness, and learning. These chemicals promote feelings of enjoyment and reinforcement to motivate performance. And this is part of the reason why our protein shake is such a good idea with children like this, or even people who are depressed, because it contains the amino acids that can help the body to develop these things. When we are deficient, it makes learning very different or very difficult. That feeling of accomplishment when we learn something new simply isn't there. Oh, wow, you were able to tie your shoes. So what? So it's not that, oh, look, I managed to ride this bike. I managed to stay on two wheels and ride this bicycle. It's a case of, okay, so I didn't kill myself. Those little things like that. But what else are these symptoms associated with? OCD, or CDO, because that's how it's supposed to be in some cases. But oppositional defiant disorder, something new that I hadn't heard of before. So they'll always argue and fight. Maybe that's where lawyers and politicians come in. I'm not too sure. They've got bad disorder. Their conduct is very disorderly. They could be bipolar. They could have dyslexia. They could have dyspraxia. They could have tics or Tourette syndrome. And that is, I remember back in the army, in my army days, we had NCO over there who had these tics, and he would often sit and he'd be winking. And the more stressed he got, the more agitated, and he couldn't control him. And you'd see his arm twitching all over and his eye blinking. Now, Tourette syndrome is also a bit of a nasty because it causes people to shout out at the most inopportune moment, and often very vulgar language and very coarse, rude language. And people look at them and they go, how dare you? How can you say that? And they actually have no control of themselves, because this is what Tourette syndrome does. It could also be the autistic spectrum condition. Now, autism is something that I've heard of, and I know a lot of people have got. And I think that might actually be a pretty good subject for me to cover at some stage, so that I can learn more about it, because it is seemingly becoming a little bit more of a problem these days. It could also be attached to attachment difficulties. I remember my niece was very attached to her mother when she was a child. And it was quite sad at one stage, because her mother couldn't even go to the toilet without this child physically attached to her leg. And she had to be locked outside of the bathroom just so she could have 5 minutes of peace. And it went on for quite a while. Today, you would never know it, because she's an amazing girl. She's an IT specialist and got a brain on her of note. There's another thing that I learned about called Erlen syndrome, which is a light-based visual processing disorder. I honestly can't tell you any more about it than that, but that is what it is. So some of these other symptoms could also be linked to these problems. Things like anxiety, speech and language disorder. So they tend to stutter, or they have difficulty enunciating words, pronouncing things. Sleep disorder. They either sleeping 18 hours a day, or they sleep like a baby. In other words, waking up every 2 hours crying. There's quite often substance abuse involved over here. So they become drug addicts or alcoholics. There are behavioral problems, which might not be linked to ADHD. They've got sensory processing disorder, which means that they don't feel things. They don't hear things like a normal person would. They've got an auditory processing disorder. Maybe they're partially deaf, or maybe they're completely deaf. Trauma. You've been attacked in your house. A lot of these symptoms, the lack of sleep, the hyperactivity, the talking nonstop, or the withdrawing, are all related to trauma. So this is why it's so important for a suspect to be tested and checked by a correct panel of medical experts and educational experts to be able to differentiate between some of these problems and ADHD. There's often developmental delay as well. And this could be related to things like cerebral palsy. Yeah, I always used to think a cerebral palsy person was always, they've got spasms and they've got to wear calipers and all sorts of things. But there's some cerebral palsy children out there who you've got to know them before you understand they've actually got cerebral palsy. They don't always go into spasm. There are other developmental delays that they have. It could be chromosomal abnormalities, your mongoloid children. Now, I'll just go through this one briefly before I quit for tonight, because I know I'm running out of time. But there are some good things about ADHD. You've got unlimited energy. They'll try anything. Hopefully not jumping off bridges without strings attached, but, you know, they'll be good conversationalists. They need less sleep. They have a good sense of humor. They're very caring. They do spontaneous things. They notice things that other people don't. They understand other kids. They can think of new ways of doing things, like Richard Branson. They like to help others. Again, Richard Branson. They're happy and enthusiastic. They're imaginative or creative. They can be very sensitive and compassionate. They're eager to make new friends. They've got a great long-term memory. They're the life and soul of any party. So that rules me out of it. They're charming. They're warm and loving. They're protective about their families. They're inquisitive. They don't hold a grudge because they can't remember what they were holding a grudge for. They're quick to forgive. Again, that short-term memory part. They're genuine. They're open. They're not hiding behind a mask. They're never boring. They find perceptive ways to do things. They're playful. They're honest. They're optimistic. And they're inventive. I'm going to stop there for now so that we can get into the rest of this next week. Does anybody have any comments or questions before I stop the recording?
Can I just say something? Listening to all of this, I think there's very few people that's normal. Especially your last part.
What is normal? There was an
Perfect,
author who wrote
and there's no such thing as perfect.
There was an author who wrote a book called Normal is the Setting on a Dryer.
Yes. Yeah.